Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend, I'm with eLearning Brothers. Today we're going to be talking about Adobe Captivate, going over some tips and tricks, a quick primer, so to speak, on Captivate. This session will be recorded. We'll get a copy of it sent out to everyone who has registered for this session, and we'll also post it on our blog sometime in the near future. If you have questions during the session, please do use that questions panel there in the GoToWebinar control panel. It looks like a couple of you have already found that questions panel, so please do use that, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. All right, so to talk to us about Captivate, we have Adam Cannon, Certified Captivate Specialist, with us today. Thank you, Adam, for your time. We recognize that you're not feeling super great, but we appreciate you stepping up and presenting for us today anyway. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
All right, thanks. I think you guys can all hear me and see my screen, so we'll go ahead and jump into it. So we're going to give you a quick primer on Captivate 2019. Before we start, I just wanted to do a quick kind of informal poll. How many of you, this is the first version of Captivate you've used? If you can just use the raise hand tool in GoToWebinar. Let me know if this is the first version of 2019 is the first version of Captivate you've used.
So again, that's right. In your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little hand you can click on if this is your first version of Captivate you've used. It looks like about 15% of our audience, 2019 is their first version.
Okay, how many of you have been using Captivate since its early days?
The dawn of time.
Since the, you can decide where in the if you want to make a comment or two about kind of what version of Captivate you started with, just so I can get a feel for it. That would be great.
So it looks like 21% of our audience is saying that they've been using it for longer than the 2019 version. And some of these versions coming in started from 2016 or 2018, started in Cap 8. Here's another one, version 5.
Oh, there we go. There's an old timer.
Yeah, maybe 2003, says one person. They're guessing there.
Okay.
So we've got a variety of audience members using lots of different ones. Oh, here's one in Captivate 3.
Wow.
That's an older one for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's almost back to the days of authorware there.
Yeah, so we've got a variety of people here in our audience.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear we've got a wide variety. Some of you have probably, are probably old hats at this and may know some of this stuff. My purpose today is to just go over some of these things in 2019 to refresh your memory if you haven't used it for a while. If you feel like what we're doing today is too basic, I understand it. It won't offend me if you drop off. But my goal is to just go through some of these cool features that are in Captivate. Some of them have been around for many of the versions of Captivate. Some of them have only been around since like Captivate 8 or 9. And some of them are a little bit newer. I'm not going to dig into some of the newest things in Captivate 2019, like some of the VR stuff. There's some great tutorials out there that are online. There's a Captivate specialist, Paul Wilson, who does some stuff on YouTube, who's got some great tutorials out there on some of the newer features of Captivate 2019. So what I'm going to try to do is just try to give you basically a quick primer on some of these things and show you how it's changed a little bit in it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump straight into Captivate. I don't really see a need to use PowerPoint for most of this, so I'm going to jump right into Captivate. So we're going to start off talking about master slides. So when you come into a Captivate, into an untitled project, a lot of times you get and be aware, this is a responsive project. For those of you who may not have seen it since the fluid boxes came out, you might be used to seeing a breakpoint mode where you see the various breakpoints up here across the top, and I can still get there if I wanted to. I can, and I'm going to preface this by saying I am using Captivate on a Mac. So there are a few differences between Captivate on a Mac and Captivate on Windows. Certainly those are questions that I can address down the road. I have used it on both. The current company I'm working for is a Mac shop, and so we're using Captivate on a Mac. So some of the menu choices or some of the ways that I access things may be a little bit different, but hopefully if you use it on Windows, you can extrapolate out and say, okay, this is where it would be. If not, there's lots of information in the forums and online with a quick Google search. So anyway, I'm here in the opening. I've opened a new responsive project. I can tell it's responsive because I've got my layout preview up here. There's some built-in layouts that I can go to. I can go in and add one if I want. I can add a custom preview here by giving it a title. If I just said, MacBook Pro, whatever. I can go in and then I can adjust these as I need to. I could say, 1280 by 720. If I needed to do something like that, I could. But I'm just going to leave it at the desktop version. And then we'll come in here and I can. And so we're going to look at master slides. And I apologize if things seem a little scattered. I'm fighting an illness, and so my brain is a little bit addled. So just by a quick survey, how many of you have used master slides in your e-learning development?
All right, the hands are raising very quickly. Looks like we're at about 30% and climbing, 35%, 40%. Okay, so yeah, about 40% of our audience have used master slides.
So then let me adjust that slightly. How many of you have used master slides in PowerPoint?
PowerPoint master slides. Okay, we're at 45% for PowerPoint master slides. Okay. So a lot of people using those.
So if you're familiar with master slides, and it sounds like almost half of us have used them, master slides are a great way to create a layout that then can be carried over and applied to multiple slides. Think of it as a sort of a mini template. We use templates in PowerPoint and in Captivate to sort of create the look and feel of a project. A master slide is essentially a template for a slide. And as we look down here, we can see that over here on my left, I've got some that are pre-built. I've got a title slide, master slide, a blank. I've got content 01. And if I wanted to rename it, I can do that up here just so it's not confusing. I could say, image on top 1. And so then it's easier to see. I can see content 02. I could say, 6 choices. So it's important to know that, these master slides are yours to utilize and to do what you want to with. And there's a lot of them that are pre-built, but I can also go in and I can build more. I could come into this blank slide and I could, if I wanted to duplicate it, so I've still got a blank slide, now I can go in and I can put in, insert a placeholder. For instance, I can insert a title and it will drop it in here. And I can just move that wherever I want. So if I wanted to put it, kind of here in the middle, I can use this align to middle to align it centered on the slide. And if I want to center it in the box, I can do that. I can change the font of it. Maybe I want it to be, we'll try to pick something that's a little bit more obvious. So I can pick Courier. I can resize it so it fits. I can change the color of it to a red. I could make it bold. And then what's going to happen is anytime I go in and use a slide, I can apply this master slide, and I'll show you that. So I can come in here to my film strip mode. Captivate's catching up to me. And over here on the master slide, you can see that I've got blank selected. So I drop down this link, and now I can come in and check this one. And now I've got my master slide, and just by double clicking that, I can go in and say, sorry, I can't type today, master slides. And then it's there. And then if I wanted to add a new slide, you notice as I click this slide and content slide, it keeps adding using whatever the last master slide or whatever I'm currently on. And if I wanted to change it now, I can go in and I can pull up 6 choices, for instance, and now I've used that. And now if I go over to master slide, for instance, I wanted to show you this, sorry, Captivates, and I wanted to come in here and maybe I want to change this text to be, we'll pick red for this text, and maybe this one to be a bluish color, and we'll just change the colors of all of these so that you can see this really quickly. We'll go for an orange there. We'll go kind of a darker yellow, and then maybe we'll go to a purple here. And so now when I come back into film strip, it's changed automatically. Now if I had already put stuff in there, I could also hit reset master slide, and it would now go apply all those changes. So if I go in here and if I can double click this right, if I say, caption 1, oh, sorry, my mouse is, there we go, caption 5, and if I change that to be now a different color, maybe I go in and I say, I want that to be this ugly kind of green, and this one now to be a black. Now if I click reset master slide, it resets them back. So that's a good tool to use for master slides. So master slides are great because I can have a lot of different slide layouts. I can create them. I can, if I'm doing an e-learning course and I say I'm going to have a bunch of these slides that are kind of the same look and feel, and I don't want to have to design them, I can start by designing one as a master slide and putting it in there. And I don't always have to use placeholders. I could actually put in an object. I could put in an image. I can go grab some image and go over here into my pictures, folders, and I can grab, let me see, where's a good one? Something like this. My computer will catch up with me. And so I can put that in on the master slide, and if I wanted to make that the background, I could either resize it this way and center it on the slide. I could apply a mask to it or whatever. But then as I come in here into my film strip mode now, and if I go to this one and I say instead of that one I want to use this one, now I've got this background on a number of slides. And the nice thing is then if I change it, I can go back to the master slide and change it. And what I can do is I could create, maybe I say, I like this one for 5 slides, but then I want, I'm going to have 4 different sections, and I want each section to have a different background picture. So I could call this one, section 1 background, and then I could just duplicate that just with a control D, and I can call section 2 background, and I can just do a replace picture and go in and get a new picture out of my out of my pictures folder, for instance, I could bring in this one. And so now I've got the same, the same thing there. So that's a quick little tutorial on master slides.
So we've got a quick question, Adam.
Okay.
There on the left side in that left ribbon, you've got master slide and object and film strip, all in that left strip. How did you get all three of them into that one section?
So up here on window, if I go in and select window and then I select master slide, and it takes a minute and it puts it over there. I can also, take away the film strip.
So it's just which things you've got selected and checked there.
Right. The film strip automatically is there. This next one is actually object state. And so that appears if I've got an object. It's just it's a choice you can do in your various layouts and things. I went in and managed my workspace, so I can create a new workspace and do all that. And there's a lot of that you can do. You also notice that I've got this across the top, this alignment bar across the top. So as I go in and I put, if I go back into my film strip here, and if I go put in, a shape, just drop in a shape here, that I have some alignment tools across the top that I can use. That's another thing that I've chose to do that appears all the time. And so it's just window and it's this align toolbar. And I like that because then I don't have to constantly go in and try to find it and say, so I've got, this align left, align center, right, top, bottom, center,
and then to ensure that you have that on every project, you're just saving that into your workspace.
Right. That's just once I activate it on Captivate, it saves it for me on every workspace. But yeah, and it's really handy to have. When you open a brand new install of Captivate, it's not there. And so that's the first thing I do is I go in and I said, okay, I'm going to do this align. I'm going to go in over here and set the properties, timing, library, and position workspaces or tools, the ones that I use the most often over here on the right, over here on the left. I'm going to make sure I've got the master slide and the object states and things selected, because then it's a little bit quicker for me to switch back and forth. I can still get into an object state by going in, clicking on this, and then going over here to state view and getting in. And you notice as I do that, it jumps into the object state, but I can also just get there by going to the panel, I guess is what it is.
Right.
So I don't always necessarily call them what Captivate calls them, but I hope you get the general idea.
Okay, great.
Any other questions on master states while we're here?
There's a comment that when I select master, sometimes it removes existing sections. And I think is that just, again, the workspace that you build out inside of master and the workspaces you build outside of master?
Right. So if I'm in a master state, I'm not sure what it means by it, remove sections. If you're talking about I'm in film strip mode and I've added a bunch of stuff on the slide and then I go to select a different master and it's going to change, like if I go in here, it's not going to keep my title if I switch to, this image on top. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it'll switch it up. Here it changed the title to be a different format up there up at the top. It depends on what placeholder element I'm using. So this one, because on this master slide this is a title placeholder. So any master slide that uses a title placeholder will convert that to
whatever fits for that master slide.
To whatever it is for that master slide. But like this one, it's just a subtitle. And so if I were to go in, and this is content 05, if I were to go into my film strip now, and I went to content 05, it keeps it there, but you can see it also has this subtitle thing. So it's, there's a little bit of practicing that you have to do with master slides, but they can be really powerful if you learn to use them correctly.
Sure.
One of the other things to point out, and this jumps into maybe we'll go right into this next section. You can see that on this master slide, this is built using fluid boxes. So fluid boxes is a relatively new feature to Captivate that is a fabulous feature for responsive design. So as I go in, I can look at, the various sizes and see as it resizes what happens as it goes through the different positions. I can also just drag this slider to see how these fluid boxes are going to react. But a fluid box essentially is a holder of objects, holder of graphics, text, things like that. And so this master slide is built with a number of fluid boxes. So I can come in, I can click on this fluid box, and I can see, if I, we'll go to this one, and I can see my fluid box selector over here to then go select them. I can see the nesting of the fluid boxes, and then down here, how they're all built. And so we're going to go into that here in just a minute. But that's the beauty of master slides too, is I can create them so that they all kind of have the same functionality in terms of the size of things, the spacing of things, and how they respond with the changing of a screen size or the resolution. All right, any other questions on master slides before we go in there, or before we move on?
There's a couple more questions, again, about formatting your workspace. If I go to Window Master Slide, my film strip tab disappears. So I guess after you've done that, you just need to replace it in there with Window. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And then do you normally place your main buttons like home and exit and things like that on your master, or on the first slide of the film strip?
It depends on how I want them to behave. I will often put them on a master slide if they're going to be, if there's some key buttons that are going to be throughout the project. But I might put them on not every slide in the layout of the master slide. So if you notice there, there's all these different layouts.
Right.
So if I wanted to every now and then have a blank slide, if I put them on the first slide and put, show for rest of project, they're going to be there the whole project. And then if I have like a slide with video on it, that maybe I want to take up the full slide, I'm still going to see those navigation buttons on the bottom. Whereas I could come into the master slide, create a master slide layout that was for my video, video player or whatever, that didn't have the nav buttons on it, and I could apply that, and then it was then in my Captivate project, I could just say once the video is done playing, move on to the next slide, and the navigation buttons would be back, but they wouldn't be overlaying every object that I put on there. So that's why I like to use master slides sometimes, is I can create, I can create a master slide that's maybe like I use it to create sections. So I have a section opener and a section closer, and then like my section closer will have navigation buttons that might be like go back to the main menu, or go back to the table of contents. There might be jump to next section, or it might be sort of a navigation tool that way that might be specific to a section rather than to the project as a whole.
Sure.
Some things like that. So there's reasons to put them on master slides versus just putting them on the first slide and saying show throughout the project. Now, if you're doing a very basic project, then maybe you don't need to put them on a master slide, but that's my answer to that.
Okay, and then one more question that just came in. Can audio be saved on a master slide?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've actually never tried that. So I tell you what, send that to me, Andrew, and I will find out, and we'll send it to you so it can be published with the write-up.
All right, sounds good.
I will answer that with the write-up. So, because it is a question I want to dig into further. I have never tried to put audio on a master slide. So, One of the other things I wanted to show you, you see over here in this title, this is one of the layouts that I've downloaded. It's just a Captivate layout. So if I'm in FilmStrip, it's actually a theme. Sorry, not a layout. I go to themes and I can go download, and this is called Harmony. And when I go into the master slide for this one, you can see it's a little different. There's some different master slides here that's got some background pictures, things like that. And so as you download those themes, you will get different master slides as well. The same goes for, this is one of the assets. I just went into the assets tool, and again, we'll cover all of this a little bit more in depth here in the next few minutes. But I just went into assets tool and went into projects. I went and found one. This one I believe is called League, this one right here. And I downloaded it, and it's got a series of master slides as well that have some different things you can do. And they're called, and like this one's got a video screen and so forth. And so each of these, whether it's an asset from Captivate, an asset from eLearning Brothers, an asset from, you know, somebody else who's building tools for Captivate, or it's one of the built-in themes that you've got, they'll generally all have master slides that are unique to that keep the coloring and the font and even the kind of the look and feel of it. And so that's a good reason to use master slides there. So this brings us into our the next kind of topic I wanted to talk about. And all of this is sort of melding together because it's all part of this Captivate. As I'm going to go back into Untitled 2 here, and I'm going to bring in, I need to go to, come on, catch up to me, there we go. So I'm going to bring in a blank slide so you can see what I'm doing. Captivate, we talked about fluid boxes, and there's a great, one of the things to do before you start any project is to think about the layout of it. Fluid boxes give you a good chance to really get a responsive layout, but one of the things you need to think about as I look at something like this is, okay, this is probably a number of different fluid boxes because I've got the whole thing divided into 2 perhaps. I've got this top section that's got 2, I've got this bottom section that's got 4. I may even have fluid, I may even want to do fluid boxes in these individual boxes so that this darker section with the number in it could be its own fluid box, and then this space with the text could be another one, so that they all respond differently. But as I go in and I want to build a fluid box, I start by saying, do I want to build them going across? And it's a little confusing because if you look at it horizontal, you know, it shows the picture, it looks like they're vertical fluid boxes, but what it means is that's the layout. It's a horizontal layout. So I choose how many I want to go. Maybe I'm going to say 4, and it drops them in here in just a minute. 4, come on. There we go. And now I've got this grab handle that I can grab and resize them. I can also go into the positions property of, if I go into each individual fluid box, which is, I got that one now, I'm in fluid box 2, I can say, okay, the width is 25.2% of the whole project, or I could do it by pixels. I could say, I want this to be 250 pixels. And so then that can resize. So there's some good things there. And then down within the fluid boxes, you've got some of those similar properties. So you just have to like smart shapes, which is I can do a solid, a gradient, or image fill. So if I wanted to do a gradient, I could do that, and I could choose, just like anything else, I can kind of choose the direction. I can add markers to it if I want, things like that. So I can do that. I also have the way the content is going to flow. Is the content going to flow vertically or horizontally? There's the way I want the text to wrap. So if I want to wrap to the next column as the thing shrinks, I can do that. If I want to squeeze it in a column, or one row or column, or symmetrical, they're all choices. And sometimes the best thing I can tell you to do is to play with them. I don't have there's a lot of tutorials that are, you know, hours long or an hour or more long just on fluid boxes. And so I'm just touching on this to give you a quick overview of it. You can always click the play button to see how it's going to work as it moves. If I had stuff in that fluid box, you could see it. There's also how I want it to align. Do I want it to align to the left, to the center, to the right? Do I want to stretch to fit? And same for vertical. Do I want there to be space around, space between, things like that? And then any padding, distribute objects. So there's some things you can do in here. The static means that, you know, as I put something in there, it's going to stay in the basic same position that it's in. The optional choice is if I have, let's go in here. If I had, you know, a series of these squares and I wanted to make one of them optional, you know, maybe I said when it gets smaller, I don't care that number 3 is there because numbers 1, 2, and 4 are the key ones. I could mark number 3 as optional, and then as it shrunk, number 3 might disappear off the screen. And so that's a good thing to understand about fluid boxes. And so fluid boxes are a great way to build your course. And then within a fluid box, so now I've got fluid box 4 selected over here, I can go in and I can say, now I want to build some vertical ones in there, and maybe I want 4 inside of there. And I can keep stacking them if I need to. You know, I want maybe 2 inside of there. And so you can see how I can really use this to kind of create some good regions and zones. And again, this is, if you look at master slides, this is a great use of fluid boxes, is something like this one, this 6 choices one, because I've got all of these little sections are fluid boxes. The title is a fluid box, the subtitle is a fluid box, and so then, and then down here, they even leave you a fluid box where you could put in nav buttons. And they give you a little bit of padding in here, and I can see the image, things like that. So, and each of those I could choose their own sort of patterns or their own properties for that fluid box. I can even add, if I wanted on this image, you know, if I wanted to create this timing, you know, this text to fade in, I could do that. So I can create a little bit of an effect that way. So that's a quick overview of fluid boxes. We can, you know, I know there's hundreds of questions on fluid boxes that can be answered and asked. And some of those may be answered as I go through and show you how to put in some assets and things like that down the road. But limited time in this webinar, and so fluid boxes are an entire webinar just in themselves. So let me see if there's any key questions we can answer.
There's questions still coming in, but one of the comments was to just run us through how to switch to the expert UI. Someone walks us through these steps, you know, go to the preferences, general settings, choose the option, enable custom workspaces. And then It also says you have to restart Captivate. So if you're not seeing, you know, what we're seeing now, you need to get into the expert workspace.
Right, and yeah, there's so many things in Captivate that we could go over that, you know, I didn't, and that's what I love about this kind of thing is it's kind of a crowdsourcing. So, you know, if you needed to get into, you know, here it is, enable custom workspaces panel, and then it tells you you'll need to restart Captivate. So, you know, that's another one that I check automatically when I come in, and so much so that I sort of forget that I even did it. You know, I'm just, once I do it once and it's there, and I don't have to think about how to do it. So sometimes I get into these things and forget about how to do that. So I'm glad that somebody pointed that out.
Excellent. So with the death of Flash coming up all ominously and whatnot, are fluid boxes Flash only, or are they used with HTML5?
Fluid boxes are HTML5. Pretty much everything, if you go into publish for devices, you notice we don't even have the option to publish as Flash anymore in 2019. because Flash is going away. So fluid boxes are really great for, you know, doing things on phones and things like that, but they do require some rethinking sometimes. You know, you're not quite as free-form because you're sort of limited to these boxes, and so you can't necessarily just do free-form stuff whatever you want, having stuff flying in from all kinds of directions, and you kind of have to rethink. But the good news about that is it does give you a really clean looking interface on any screen size.
Sure.
And with fluid boxes, the nice thing is with breakpoints, you had to go in and you had to design, you had to think about each breakpoint. Okay, what's this going to look like at this breakpoint? And there were some places where you could go in and you could say, okay, at this breakpoint, I want this object to show up. And there was a lot of, so you were increasing your development time by having to go into the various breakpoints and mess with stuff to make it look the way you wanted. With fluid boxes, that's essentially why they're called fluid boxes. They're a little more fluid in that you put something in them, as long as you set those parameters in, you know, in your fluid box, you know, panel over here. This does a lot of the thinking and guesswork for you.
Yes.
And so you don't have to think about, okay, when I get down to a smaller screen size, what's that going to look like? And with this new interface, of course, as I put something in, I can just drag it and see what it's going to look like right away. And say, okay, great, I can see that that's resizing. These are stacking the fluid boxes the way I want, you know, and that gives me, so even before I start putting stuff in, I can put in some fluid boxes and say, okay, yep, now I see how those are going to go. In fact, I would generally suggest, you know, doing some stuff where maybe you make them different colors or put numbers in them, so that as you, especially as you're starting to work with them, that as you do resize things, you can see, okay, where does number 1 go, or where does the blue one go, so that I know, okay, as I'm at this smaller screen size, that one's going to turn horizontal and do this, and so I need to think about all of these things as they do it. And really, the best suggestion I can give you for fluid boxes is just to play with them, just to start getting, not be scared of them. You know, don't do it on a production grade project, but you know, when you got a few minutes of spare time, or you're in between projects, or you're just, you know, you're looking to learn a little bit, get in and play with fluid boxes. Go look at some of the, I'm sure eLearning Brothers has some good webinars on using fluid boxes. I know a number of people have done them, but also, like I said, Paul Wilson, Captivate specialist, and even the Adobe forums are a great place to utilize them, or to learn how to use them. But you know, there's a lot of people. If I absolutely have to go back to breakpoint mode, I can do that right here. For me, it's under project. I can switch to breakpoint mode, so that then I can go back to, okay, it says I have to save it, so I can save it, call it whatever, you know. We'll go into, just save it into my documents and just call it test 1. And now I can go into project, switch to breakpoint mode if I absolutely need to. All fluid boxes, all 360, yep. So then I want to say test 1.2.
So it's saving it as a separate file. Okay.
Right. It's, yeah, it's changing the file over, and it does create a separate file so that you still have that original one back. But anything you do after this, obviously, is not going to be saved in that separate file. And so if I put in new stuff here in breakpoint mode, it won't, you know, and then you notice it took away any blue formatting I had. And so this is back to the traditional Captivate, where I can see, and as I go into, as I drop a box in here, and I can go into the various breakpoints in position, I can see the different colors that appear and so forth to anchor it, to let me know, you know. So now I see that at this breakpoint it's here. When I move to this breakpoint, I can move it down here, and now my position changes and there's pink around there. So I can go back to breakpoint mode if I want to. Sometimes you need to do that there's also when you open a project that's been made in, and I don't know why I can't say this, breakpoint mode. There, I think it's just my addled brain. A lot of times over here on the right, under the properties, you will get a suggestion that says suggest fluid boxes. And so it will take a project and say, here's where I think you should put in fluid boxes. So you might see something like this, where you've got, this is built with fluid boxes, but I might have built this in breakpoint mode, for instance, and it might come in and suggest fluid boxes and say, I'm going to suggest that you put this in a fluid box. It's not always completely flawless. I mean, it's, a little bit like you just sort of suggesting to someone else what they do, with their interior design in their house. And, it doesn't work necessarily all the time, but does give you a good idea of sort of what the computer thinks it should do. And it's maybe a jump start on getting started with fluid boxes. And so that's a good way to do it as well. So anyway, so that's fluid boxes.
That's excellent. Another question came up, and there's a couple that are similar here. So how do you set a type font for all projects? So is there a way to make it so you save, you import a font and you make that available for every project moving forward?
Yes, that's in this magic thing referred to as the OSM, or the Object Style Manager, where I can come in here and I've got these default caption styles. So I can go in here and I can change it. If I want to say my default caption style, I want it to be, instead of Arial, I want it to be Courier, and I apply it and I click OK. Then as I come into a project, we'll go into here, into Untitled 1, and we'll go, I want a new. So, oh, hang on, it's catching up to me. I clicked too fast. So if I come in here and I put in a text caption, if I've saved it in the Object Style Manager, default caption style, I can go in, like I said, and change it. And then when I open Captivate right now, because I've already got tabs open, it's keeping the Object Style Manager for what's there. But if I do this before, if I go into Object Style Manager from before I ever open a project, I can go in and I can set all these. I can create new ones. As you get into some of the various templates, especially like from eLearning Brothers, you'll see some of these that are titled like ELB, Caption Style 1, whatever. You can create your own, and then the beauty of that is this ability to cascade it down. So as I change it here, if I said, I want to make this text orange or red, and now I see this plus sign out here, I can click this and I can either, create a new style, save it as an existing style, save changes, or I can apply it to, or whatever, or I can reset the style. So I can go back and reset it to whatever the default is. But that's a way that you can set that throughout as your Object Style Manager. And for me, that's under the Edit menu on a Mac, Object Style Manager. And then I've got standard objects, got a whole slew of them here, captions, even within captions, there's more, there's text captions, rollover captions, so forth. So you can spend, a good day probably going through each one of these things and customizing it how you want, including, the center, whether it's bullets, whether it's spacing, margins, all that kind of stuff, even the caption type. If you want your default caption to be, have an ivory sort of look to it, I can do that. So I can go through and I can change it. I can even export it so that I can export it out and save it, and save it onto my computer, and then share that with others on my team. And then I would just go in and import. And as I do it, I can import and export certain styles or all styles or whatever. But then as I import, I can go find it on my computer, and it's got this CPS tag, and I bring that in, and then I can have that in my Object Style Manager as well. So really quickly, I've touched on master slides and fluid boxes. I want to show you really quickly a couple of things that play together well, and that's graphics and assets. So bringing in graphics or any sort of media library, there's a couple ways to do it. I can go in and I can grab an image, which is generally a JPG or a PNG, and just bring it in. And when I open that, I get, search on my computer. Okay, I can go find one, and I can say, let's bring in, this one again. And I can put that in. I can grab an SVG if I want, which is just a scalable vector graphic to work with. I could bring in audio, video, animation, so forth, characters. So if I go into characters, it opens the asset library and it gives me a choice of a bunch of different characters. If I go out to eLearning Brothers and have an eLearning Brothers subscription, there's hundreds more of these things. This is only, 15 or 20 of these different characters. But the eLearning Brothers have a whole library full of all kinds of these things, different poses, different dress, things like that, some animated ones, things like that. And you see for these, there are 50 or so, 40 plus different poses in the eLearning Brothers library. I believe there's well over 100 for each of the cutout people. So I can bring those in. And really, they come in, and the thing I like about this is pretty much anything that I bring in, I can use it as a button, so I don't have to create an overlay over the top of it. Now my picture becomes a button, and I can go to my actions, and I can say, I can say open a URL. I could say the URL is just www. If I could spell google.com. I can specify it to open in a new window, continue playing the project if I want or not, stop the project, turn off the hand cursor, or turn on the hand cursor, turn off the click sound, things like that. And so now that's a button. So now if I were to preview, from this slide, it would show that. And we'll see if it previews in this main screen. Now it comes over here, and I click on that, and now I click on that button and it takes me to Google. And so it's just a picture, so I don't have to create an overlay over the top of it. So that's one of the nice things about working with media and things like that. There's also a whole asset library. If I come up here to the top right, there's this asset library button. I can also get there just within my media. I can click this asset library, it's the top tab, and it all opens the same thing. And there within this, there are these three tabs: assets, discover, and downloads. And if my computer catches up with me, I'll show you each of those. This discover is where I can go in and look at the Adobe. If I've got an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, or go into the library, I can go into the stock images. If I go to downloads, I can see what I've already downloaded. So I can go to assets that way and get in there. And there's a whole bunch of things I can, and then over on the left, there are various choices. There's projects, so I can click projects. That gives me a whole set of projects I can do. There's characters, icons, so forth. And as I come in, I'm trying to remember. So now now that I had projects, I'm in the Adobe Captivate asset library, which brings me to the eLearning Brothers assets that come free with your Adobe or your Captivate subscription. And you can see there's a whole bunch of these. There's templates. Course starters, games. I can go into the games assets and look at what games are out there. Here's a great one for one coming up, a Halloween trivia thing. There's also characters. And within here, you can see, this is where you see a whole plethora of different characters, different nationalities, things like that. And I can do photorealistic or I can do illustrated. Within photorealistic, I can start to sort a little bit based on, you know, different categories. People with disabilities, maybe I want, and I can see that. I can go in and say, okay, let's look at all these people in wheelchairs or with different disabilities. And same thing, if I go to illustrated, I might be able to go to illustrated and stick figures. So this assets tool is a great way to get a bunch of assets that have already been created to work specifically with Captivate without going to Google and running the risk of violating copyright or getting assets that you may or may, you know, that you aren't sure will work with Captivate. There's a lot of stuff out here already built in and already preloaded into Captivate. And if to the eLearning Brothers library and go to their subscription, there is even more out there for you. A whole plethora of, sorry, I like that word, of libraries, templates, cutout people, some stock assets, PowerPoint templates, medical images, icons is a great one to use. So there's a whole bunch of stuff out there you can use for any of your authoring tools, and so that comes with your subscription. So
the question did come up about how you access those within the tool.
Okay, how I get to those eLearning Brothers assets that aren't there?
No, so within the tool, how did you pull up this assets window?
Okay, so over here on the top right of my ribbon, there's this assets button that will do it. I can also go to media, asset library, and do it. Even if I go to characters, it also pulls it up because the characters are part of that assets library. So there's a couple of ways to get there. I believe I can even go insert. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so those are the three ways. So I can go to asset, and that brings just my assets button over here on the ribbon that brings it up, and then I can go, again, bounce around between the different things. Here's, you know, I've got all my quiz icons, things like that. So that's how I get into it. So that's I'm bumping up against the clock here, but if there's questions about that, great. If not, I encourage you to go out to the eLearning Brothers library and look at what they've got for sure, so that you can see what's out there. There's a lot there that's built in, but there's also a lot there that's is even more to offer. So let's see if there are any questions, and then I'll wrap this up.
There's a couple more questions coming in that are a little bit beyond the scope of this session. Okay. One person is saying that they don't have the assets button in the upper right, and they don't have an assets under the media button. Did that change with a different version of Captivate? How long has that been the case?
That has been there since at least, I want to say 9. Captivate 9.
Okay.
It may have been 8, but there should be still a way to get there. The assets button in 2019 moved all the way over here to the right. In earlier versions, it's kind of right here by community.
Okay.
So it may be a little bit different place on the ribbon. I don't think it's always been under media either. I think it's always just been here. It seemed like there was also that I could do it by inserting. I thought there was a way I could insert something here, but that seems to have gone away in 2019, or at least not on the Mac version. So
sure. Okay, great. So I will send a couple more of these questions over to you, Adam, offline, and we'll see if we can't get these answered by the write-up. I believe you've got one more slide for me. Just if you would like to try more assets than what is already included in Captivate, there are some eLearning Brothers that are included in Captivate. You can access them through that assets panel. But if you'd like to try some of the other ones, you can register for a free trial, grab 10 free assets, any 10 assets from our entire library, you can grab those with a free 7-day trial. So visit eLearningBrothers.com, and there's a sign up for free trial button right there on the main page. You can also, if you want to try to skip that step and just give us a call to get set up, you can call us at 801-796-2767. Or if you have more questions about the free trial or what we've got to offer for Adobe Captivate, you can send us an email at info@elearningbrothers.com. Thank you so much, Adam, for this awesome presentation. Very, very useful. Lots of people learned a lot on this today, and more comments are coming in just saying that this has been very, very useful. So thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we hope we will see you on our next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.